And I got on to a site, and the guy was doing it. He did it in 49 seconds flat with about a 12-inch trout. But I didn't expect him to do it the way he did it. He slit them open from the anus right up to underneath the chin. And then he just put the knife in behind the gills on an angle and just ran it slowly and surely back to the tail.
Yep.
And that was counter to what I would have thought, because the last time I filleted some pinks, I slid it down the backbone and did it that way, you know. And by the time I'd done 7 pinks, I was better at it than pink number 1, but I also had a hell of a backache, you know.
Well, that's the way I learned, was to get the guts out and then cut behind the gills and then run it down the backbone.
Yeah.
And then if you're doing a big fish at that point, you can actually flip it over and you can run it right down the skin and skin it.
Yeah.
And I can take the skin off a halibut with this thing quite readily. This is you probably can't get these anymore. This is an old Henry one. Schrade make a pretty nice one. These things, the nice thing about them is good steel gives you a fine edge and it will hold the edge.
Rapala makes a good one that size. I have a bigger Rapala that I use on salmon, and it works really well. But it was only about $25.
Yeah.
Gerber makes big ones too.
My Rapala also has a sharpener built into it.
Yeah, I think mine is a Rapala.
Yeah.
A fish you can't fillet that way is a pike.
Yeah, as far as sharpeners go, if you go to the World of Knives, they sell these little electric sharpeners, and boy, they are really good. There's one that does that at the 20-degree edge, and you just run it through the sharpener, and then you run it through the buffer wheel, and they come out sharp. I would not do without it.
Guys, I bought this kit. It's for sharpening, and it's got a angle thing on it. And
I got one of those too.
Forget what it's called.
When we get back together, I will bring my stone that I picked up in Japan, and I was taught how to sharpen knives in Japan.
I was about to say,
demonstrate the technique to you guys at the club. It works really well.
I was about to say, if you want to watch some interesting things, watch the Japanese, the way some of the Japanese do filleting, and particularly of large fish. It's really wild to see them do it.
Yeah.
We'll get Peter back and do some demonstrations how to fillet a fish.
Yeah.
I had a Japanese visitor a few years back, and they were staying with us, and he was a chef, and he took my Japanese knives, and said, "These things aren't sharp. Where's your sharpener?" And I showed him the stone. He said, "That's not flat." And he took it outside and put it on a concrete block and rubbed it till it got completely flat. And then he used it to sharpen the knife. So if your stones are starting to go, that's a little trick to help get an even edge on the knife.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The Japanese knives, they're sharpened at a 15-degree angle. North Americans are 20.
Well, some of the Japanese are sharpened on one side and they're flat on the other.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, so they only sharpen one side?
Pardon?
They only sharpen one side?
Yeah, I'll get the knife and I'll show you.
Yeah, you can do that, but you have to take the burr off the side. So you do have to run it through a strap or a steel to take the burr off the flat side.
So this knife is sharp on this side, but it's completely flat on the other side. So when you sharpen it at an angle, and then you just simply turn it over and run it across the stone.
Take the burr off, yeah.
Take the burr off.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but their knives have two different kinds of steel. They have a harder steel on the outside, and there's a softer steel in the middle. And the softer steel is at the edge that you're sharpening, and that's why you have to keep sharpening them, because the softer steel gives a much better edge, but it goes off quite quickly. when you
So you know it's sharp when you can cut paper, right?
Silk.
Yeah,
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
yeah.
You can cut silk in midair, you know it's sharp.
I can remember when we were first married and living in a little apartment in North Vancouver. My mother-in-law came over to visit us, and we were having, I think, roast beef or something for dinner. And she said, "That knife's not sharp." And she scurried out the front door of the apartment building, found an old piece of granite, a rock, and immediately whipped the knife around the granite and brought it back in. And it worked. And I still use that when we're camping, you know. Find a good rock, really resistant rock.
I guess we'll get started. Christopher sent out the minutes of the meeting. So what we'll do is we'll just talk about the minutes, and then we'll talk about the format as we go through the summer. We came to an agreement that there wouldn't be minutes for this meeting or through the summer meetings. It would be more casual. Christopher, of course, complained he likes doing the minutes, but other than that, the whole thing is about still getting together and share some stories. So what we'll do is try to, just for some structure, because sometimes without structure, things can go, sideways, and we can have some quiet moments. But did anybody get to read Christopher's minutes?
Yes, I did.
I did.
Yep.
Any questions or observations on the minutes?
No, I move we accept them.
Okay, Barry, seconder?
Yes, Jim.
Yep.
Colin, okay. We're not writing it down other than it was approved. So for format, how would we like to go about this? I mean, it's a great opportunity to talk about experiences. I know just before this, Colin was talking about his fishing trip. So, and also I think it's great that if somebody knows somebody that's ill or something, we can pass that along and contact that person or their family. So any ideas?
So why not follow a bit of the same format, and we can skip over some parts like a treasurer's report and things like that are not necessary.
Okay, I have no problem with that.
I still like the freshwater and saltwater reports. Those are good.
Yeah, no, we were going to have that type of format. I mean, conversation, anyways. But so it was kind of roughly go through the format.
Another one that we don't have is we don't have anything really on sort of formal on upcoming trips. I mean, so
yeah,
that'd be nice.
I think 6 people dying, people were getting scared. Anyways, is anybody aware other than Art of somebody out sick?
Art Raven, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's fine. I saw him last weekend, and he, if you didn't realize there was some issues, you wouldn't have known there was anything wrong with him. He was perfectly normal. We had a get together with him, and he was just fine. I mean, other than mobility issues, but he seems to have recovered significantly his mental acuity compared to what it was when he first came out of hospital.
Well, Sandy thought it was the medication, so that's glad to know it was. Once you get off the medication, then you start to go back to be your old self. Before we started, Jim had asked to speak on something here. So Jim, I see you're there, so why don't you go for it?
Yeah, I was interested in, I think, the fly that Dave was talking about, and I'm going up to Campbell River, and I like to fish with weighted flies in that area. And of course, Roderick Hake Brown, he fishes a lot with streamers. So I was trying to get some lead onto my hook, and I was having a difficult time. And I'm not reinventing the wheel here, but it was just something that occurred to me, and it seemed to work. And what I did is I put my lead onto the thread spool. And by the way, I have a Renzetti, and it's, it spins, and I use this thread on it. So all I did is I just put the lead onto the, and spun it, and it came out really quite neatly. And I don't know if you've experienced the problem before, but when you time the lead on, it has a tendency to break. And when I tried spinning it on by hand, I was putting twists on it and it broke. And I found it very successful. And you can't see it very well, but you know, there was the end result. And there's absolutely no wastage on the lead. And so when I fished for chum up in Souk last year, I was using the, I like the Tijuana Sunrise, you know, the red, the yellow, and the orange. And I thought, well, this time when I go up, I'm going to tie the Tequila Sunrise. And of course, the addition to the Tequila Sunrise is the purple. So I tied some up, and that's with my pattern there. And it sort of looks like it's just a recipe that came out of my head. And it's basically a Mickey fin, except as you can see, it's sort of on steroids. So it has a collar on it. And when you're putting the lead on, the reason I showed that, you have to remember to leave gaps for the tail and gaps because I put the, well, I can give you the recipe. Actually, it's pretty simple. It's a size 6 stainless steel hook with a size 10 lead and purple thread, purple flash groove, and the body's purple diamond braid. And the wing combination is the red and the yellow. And then I used orange spracken for the collar. So
Jim, I'll get you to take a picture of it and send it to John, and he can post it with your recipe.
well, it wasn't really the recipe I was interested in. It was because the lead going on is the most important part of the fly.
Yeah. I think in a way it'd be interesting if sitting in on the fly time, Florin, who's actually, is he in Edmonton, Dave?
Yep.
Pardon?
He's in Edmonton, yeah.
Yeah. Florin uses a bobbin bender. What was he calling it, Dave?
Bobbin tender.
Tender.
Yeah.
And you'd like to see his invention because it's a fairly simple fix for not wasting any materials.
He uses elastic and a bead, and he has a means of collecting together, and it just wraps around the spool, and you feed the material out through the bead.
Yeah.
So when we
Just
get
for running rivers like Eve and stuff like that for weights and stuff. Winky came up with over in Club came up with a really good weight that slides up and down your line and yet doesn't hang up on rocks very much. So I posted it in the forum, and that's the link there for you in case you want to have a look at it.
Is that real lead, John?
That's a lead covered in a rubber, and it bounces off the bottom and doesn't hang off on rocks for too much. So
The other solution is to tie Clouser minnows.
Yes.
Just different sizes of lead eyes. They work like a hot damn.
Well, thank you, Jim. There's always a new way or a way of getting that fly down. I think what we'll do is go right into the freshwater fishing. You want to lead that, Ron?
Sure. Well, yeah, there was some talk earlier, so why don't you start it off, Colin?
Okay, I did 2 trips this week. I went with Christopher to Prospect and I did really well. The week before I got 1 small fish, so this time I was really happy. I got the biggest trout I've ever had out of Prospect. I can call it a 3 pound, but it was 2.85 when I weighed it at home. But for me, it was the biggest trout I've had. I got a 2 pound bass, a 1.5 pound trout, and another little shaker, which, so I had a really good day. And I went out with John yesterday, and to say it was slow would be an understatement, but John outfished me, though the fish I caught was bigger than his by at least a centimeter. But they're not very big fish in that lake. But we had a great time, and the eagles are buzzing over our heads whenever we caught something on the line. But
so yeah, that was at Spectacle Lake up on the Malahat, and we got a fish basically at each end. And my second trout, yeah, I got buzz bombed by a big eagle. So I let the trout dive, and when the trout dove, it jumped the hook, so I didn't land it.
Yeah, I was at Spectacle as well. I got 3 bass and 1 trout. Nothing of
Where
great
did-
size, but
Where did you get the bass from? Up against the shorelines?
I was actually fishing from shore.
Hmm.
So
Where was
there's
that?
a clear area in the second or the further away loop.
Yeah.
And there's that clear area which you can walk to. And there's a couple of nice rocks to fish off there. And if you can do kind of a spay cast using a lightweight single hand, and there's also some gaps behind you so you can cast regular, get out pretty far.
So which
What were you
which
using
was
for
that,
bass?
Tony?
Fly?
I fished with an LK caddis the whole time.
Yeah.
And later on in the afternoon, it was about 5:30, 6 o'clock, when there was no one else around, which was rather pleasant.
And which lake was it? I didn't catch.
Spectacle.
Spectacle. Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Okay, anybody else been out freshwater fishing?
I was in Prospect with Dale Friday, and for the first 2 hours, I got a dozen or so hits, and they all let go. And then after that, they started staying on the line, and I was doing well until one of them wrapped itself around the other line, and then wrapped itself around my motor, and that slowed things down a bit. But
I have a suggestion to you. If you're losing fish on a barbless hook, bend the hook in a little slightly and off to the side, and you'll find it will retain fish better that way.
yeah, I'll try that. Even Dale was missing them and other fishers. That's the thing. If it was just me, I'd say there's something I'm maybe doing wrong. But what few people were on the lake at the same time have the same difficulty. But I will take your advice, Ron, and try it out.
Well, it worked for me up at Community Lake. I was fishing a booby and I was losing big trout. And I bent the hook out and in slightly, and I started retaining them.
Barry, I don't think you have to cut the barb off in the local lakes. Have you tried that?
I'm sorry?
I don't think you have to cut the barbs off in the local lakes. So
The lakes that I was fishing at barbless only, yes. And in
Oh,
fact,
I'm talking about Barry and Prospect though. Like, I don't think you have to. Are you fishing barbless, Barry?
Well, most of the time, yeah, but I found with barbless quite often, I found they work better because the hook sinks into the pallet deeper. So, it's a toss-up, I guess.
at this time of the year, I would be fishing barbless anyway because it's much easier to release the fish.
Exactly. Well, I always.
That's it. And it's easier to get out of your finger, too.
No, I eat my fish. So I go barbs
the
on
back of your
local
head.
lakes.
John is like an eagle.
Okay, any other freshwater comments?
Just on Spectacle, there's a lot of deadfall, a lot of deadheads, and a lot of branches, and a lot of crap on the bottom. So I think we lost about 2 or 3 flies each, both Colin and I. A lot of snags.
Oh,
Yes, on Spectacle Lake's a very cold lake, so even at this time of year, the trout aren't that deep.
Mm-hmm.
just to repeat myself, if you're fishing Prospect, if you're down the far end, the south, I guess it would be called the south end, near the golf course, as you know, there's a little bay there with a lot of, weeds and stuff in it. Right next to it, there's there's a home with a wharf and that. Remember, that hunk of pipe is still up there with no marker on it. It sticks up it's about 1 inch, I guess, in diameter, and it sticks up about 18 inches. It's sure easy to go over it. Be careful when you're down there. It's about 100 yards from shore or from the wharf.
Anybody else for freshwater? Anybody been out saltwater fishing?
Yeah, I got 2 items. A week and a half ago, I went with Laura and we went to Bamberton Park over the other side of the Malhat and went clamming at low tide, and easy peasy, 60 clams each, all little necks. There is a bunch of other clams there, but a lot of other people clamming. It didn't appear like they were stopping at 60, but anyway. And so we had 120 clams, so we had a nice couple meals. And then the second one is just went crabbing yesterday at Sydney Pier for a couple hours while I picked my mom up at the ferry, and had 4 red rock, but only one was in size. The other 2 were, I had a couple females and one was below size. So there's only one crab, I tried to put it back. That's it.
How busy was it?
I was on the short pier, the commercial pier, not the big long crabbing pier.
Yeah.
And it was there was nobody. There was one guy fishing there, and on the long pier, it appeared it was nobody there. Zero,
Wow.
nothing on it, nobody. So, and that was yesterday, which was a Monday. You know, so
Yeah,
weather
one of
was
the fellas
reasonable.
at the hatchery was out in Souk. He says he caught 3 large coho, but unfortunately all wild, so he couldn't keep. But that was on, when was it? Friday.
I wonder if we should plan a fish out or something.
The coho fishing has been planned, has been very good, according to Island Outfitters reports, and also what I'm seeing on the BC Forum. There's been a lot of coho around. They're not very big, but there are lots of them around. And actually quite a few hatchery coho. So people have been keeping their limits of 5 and 6 pound cooked fish.
Is that out of Victoria or is that out of Port Renfrew?
It was at Souk and Beecher Bay.
Okay.
The fish seem to move back and forth. So some reports on some days, the fishing was very good off Beachy Head. At other days, it was down at Otter Point.
Anybody else have anything at saltwater? Quiet fence. You haven't been out, Dennis? Fishing?
No, I still got this hip problem, and I got to get that fixed up first.
Because you need to be rebuilt.
Yeah,
Not like you. It's not like you to be sitting.
that's true.
I'd just like to comment on Ron's comment about bending the points on the hooks. That really does work in saltwater very effectively. I just don't lose any fish anymore in saltwater with the bend sideways and the tip bent in. It works like a hot down.
Well, it's basically like a circle hook.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah.
I guess Dave has offered to show us some knots today. Maybe it'd be a good opportunity to do that.
Well, first, a couple of things. Are we going to do fly tying again next week?
Is there an interest? I mean, it certainly has been well attended up until now. Again, Dave's been a great host, and Florin actually has helped him out.
Yep. I was thinking we could do another saltwater fly. That one.
Saltwater flies would be good. Yep.
And then the blue charm. And then the purple peril. So I'll have a look and see what material I've got and see if there's something I can do.
Okay.
These all came out of a book that if you don't have one, you should probably try and get a hold of. This is
that the one John looked up and was $110?
This is $26.99 when I bought it.
Yeah.
Flies of the Northwest by and it's a pretty darn good book. Lots of interesting fly patterns in there.
Dave, could I
Is
ask?
that an American publishing company?
Yes, Flancamato.
Yeah, that might even be the one that I showed you last Saturday with my
very good book.
Cactus
And
fly.
the way it's bound, it lies flat, so you can.
Yeah, it's $42 on Amazon right now. Before we get into knots and stuff, are we going to talk about upcoming trips?
John, before you do that, if you go through a match and tell them that you're a club member, they'll give you a pretty significant discount on the book.
Go through where?
It used to be
Amato Books.
Amato, Frank Amato. He's out of Washington State.
I did have a quick question. Is anybody going to be fishing Campbell River this year for pinks?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to do that.
When do they go up, Jim?
Well, I'm going to go up there early, but like I think there's more of an expert than me at that, and he's looking around somewhere, and it's Ron Esty. He would be able to give you better times than I could. But the thing is, there's a very interesting fly in, if you go to Teddy's website and you go into pink salmon, there's the CRS, the Campbell River Special, and it's not a bad fly. It works really effectively, and if anybody's going up there, you may want to look at that. So just go on to Teddy's site, pink flies, and the Campbell River Special. But I think Ron,
You're talking in the river itself, right?
I only fish rivers. I don't fish the ocean at all, period.
Last year I was up there and you weren't allowed to keep anything until after the 1st of August.
Well, I fly fishing only area, you don't keep them anyways.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim, do you fish the Quinsam where it comes into the Campbell?
Of course, that's the fly fishing only area.
Yeah.
That's a great spot.
If you like high sticking through there, there's an awesome spot there. If you go into the where the pump house is, and instead of going to the big pool, if you go down to the little riffle down there, and you can high stick through there, and you can pick fish out pretty easily there. It's a great. In fact, I'm going to take my little nephew there. He's 12, and his grandma wanted me to take a spinning rod with me, and I refused to. So he's going to fly fish through, and that's where I'm going to take him because you don't have to cast very far. Heavy weighted flies though. But I'm not sure the dates, Ron. You'd know better than I do.
Virtually all of August.
All of August?
Jim, is there a map of the Campbell River fishing pools?
I'm sure there must be, but I don't know them. I don't think you really need it. All you have to do is just drive up the street and see where all the cars are parked. The most famous one, of course, is the Roderick Haig Brown Pool, and it's usually pretty full. And it's not uncommon to see people in there with not scuba gear, but with glasses and flippers looking to see if the fish are in, because Haig Brown used to do that. So, you know, it's not uncommon to see people. They're pretty serious fishermen up there. But, you know, all you have, like, if you go into the campground, the Quinsam is right across the road from that. If you go up a little further to the Quinsam, and if you go across the logging bridge, there's a beautiful trail that takes you up the far side. And if you go up the far side, there's generally less people because you need a little more athleticism to go up there. But if you go into the store, I'm sure they'd have a map for you.
Yeah, the T.
Well, we have one in our club. That's this one here. It's pretty basic. But as Jim said, if you go to where the Quinsam comes in, anywhere around there is fantastic fishing. I think there are more fish out the Quinsam than they do any further up. But I've caught dozens there at one time. Just amazing. Every cast you seem to catch one. But anyway, it's not always like that though.
That's where the hatchery is, isn't it? On the
Yeah.
Yes, it's on, yes.
Yeah, there's a hatchery on Quinsam.
Yeah.
Fish just pour in there. But you want to get away from the guys throwing the lead around because they are deadly. And it's a zoo. But
Hey Dave, it's Mick here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Before the guys start banging on my roof, because I got a new roof, I'll just give a 2-minute environmental report and then I'll sign off if that's okay.
That's great. Go for it.
That water bucket article, it's getting really well received by quite a lot of people, including the Gorge Waterway Initiative people who distribute it. We were really happy with that article about Peachy. So that helps to build credibility. The flow report that we distributed 2 weeks ago, we got some immediate feedback from Ron Tolmie of the province and retired provincial biologist Peter Law. So we spent the last week doing a quick update, and I'm re-releasing it, and because I sent it out to about 20 people, and we're asking that if they have any review to do their review of the new copy. So it didn't please me to have to send out another somewhat different report, but it's definitely a new improved version. It's a very technical, difficult report to write, and it's now improved with some graphics and a bigger explanation of the methodology. Tonight I'm leading a walk for the bees. I've just put a notice out. Everybody's welcome. 6:30 at the Nature House at Beaver Lake prompt. And we're just going to walk below the Beaver Lake Dam, just looking along the path there at the state of the upper Colquitts. And I've done some work on the Legacy Fund as you directed me a week ago. And the Millstream will have some information in about 2 weeks' time, whether they've got money from other sources. So I've been talking with both World Fisheries Trust and Ian at Peninsula Streams, and we're delaying any recommendations to the Legacy Committee for 2 to 3 weeks while I get feedback and find out if any more big donors are coming in. So we'll be dealing with a request for Peninsula Streams and or World Fisheries Trust, but it's still a work in progress. So it's quiet right now on my roof. If there's any quick questions, I'll take them. Otherwise, I'll sign off and leave you to the knot tying.
Hey, Mick, I'd like you to pass on recommendations to the young woman who wrote the article there. That's some of the best writing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
If you want to get an idea of the whole project, boy, read that one.
Yeah, some great graphics and great quotes, and yeah, she did a good job. We all helped with the editing, including me. And Kim Stevens, the editor, he's got a template and a format, and he took about 2 or 3 pages of script, and just by layout and getting some quotes from elsewhere, you're right, it's a very, very effective article. I've had rave reviews from a number of pretty prominent people. It's great. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah,
I'd say the same thing, Mick. I enjoy reading it.
Thank you. I'll mute and clear off, and I'll join you next week, guys.
Okay, thanks, Mick.
Thank you.
So somebody mentioned casting. On Saturday, I had Ahmed over, and we went down to Cadborough Bay Park, and I stuck a fly rod in his hand and started him casting. As usual, for most beginner casters, he has a little too much break in the wrist on the back cast, but we'll fix that out next time. I gave him a try at 3 different rod weights so he could get a feel for how different rods are one from another. He's interested in acquiring a rod. If the club has any old fly rods for sale, he'd be interested.
I don't know if there was any left.
Yeah, I thought maybe we'd gotten rid of most of them.
Yeah.
I think I got
Dennis, was there anything left?
Yeah, there were a couple upstairs before we moved. I don't know where they are now.
Okay.
My place.
Oh, that was the next question.
No, it wasn't
Well,
fly
that's
plate.
what I'm saying. I think, now I don't know what kind of shape they're in, but I've got a couple of fly rods that were, left. I don't know about the reels, couple of reels. I don't know if they're in great shape, but the rods we have.
If he just needs something to hold the line, and because I don't think he's going to be doing a lot of distance casting to start with.
I'll check it out and report
Okay.
back.
Sounds good. He's keen and he listens well. Knots.
Okay, put that down.
Okay, so I'm going to start from the back to the front.
Oh, just a second, Dave. I'll get everybody else to mute.
Okay. I hope I can get this so you can see what I'm doing. This is a fly line itself. I'm going to be using some backing material so that you can see different colors. And I hope it's clear enough that you can see actually what's going on.
One other question, Dave. I'll get John to record it if he can.
Okay. And I've got some Maxima. I hope you can see that as well. It's a little bit.
It's kind of tough against your t-shirt.
Yeah, I might have to put.
You might need a wardrobe change.
Yeah. I
You don't want wardrobe failure on a Zoom thing.
Yeah, I won't use Maxima for a whole lot. So the
Dave,
first knot.
Excuse me, Dave. Could you announce the name of the knot that you're going to start before you start?
Absolutely.
Thank
yeah.
you.
So the first knot, I'm going to use this little tool. It's a nail knot tool. And I use this I don't keep it in my vest. I do this when I'm doing some prep work at home. So if you're going to put a new fly line on your backing, this is the tool I would use. And to do this, it's pretty straightforward. There's a little, this is the backing, and here's the fly line. And just to demonstrate, I'm using 30-pound backing. So what you do with the tool is you take a length of the backing with the standing line going to the reel off to the side here, and you put the line in this little notch at the end. You put your finger on this flat part here to hold it in place, and then you wrap around the tool. Oops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you take the tag end of the backing and slip it in underneath. A little tricky because the backing tends to get spread apart here. There you go. So you can see that it's now in that little snoot underneath. Then you take your fly line, and the tip of the fly line goes from the front, the point end, and it goes in underneath those 4 wraps that you just made. Shove it up there a little bit. And then to set the knot, all you do is you grab the tag end of the backing and jerk it off the knot. Whoop, that didn't work. Pull too hard. Let's do that again. This generally works pretty good. And through the hole here. Works better with mono. This is also why I do it at the workbench, when I can rest my hands on the bench. Come on, get in there. Where's my scissors? Braided backing is not the easiest to work with here. There we go. Being ornery. I'll show you the easier route later. Get in there. There we go. Okay. I got it. And again, you stick you see that? You stick the end into the hole here. And you just got to get it up there a bit. And then you just pull that knot off, and it wraps around the fly line. And if it's not too tight, you can then slide the knot down until it's near the end of the fly line, and then grab the two pieces of backing and cinch the daylights out of it, and then trim the excess. So one of the problems with these kinds of knots that are basically tied around the backing is that you see the little stub of the fly line there, and if you're reeling the fly line in, that can get caught up on your guides. So you get this stuff. It's called UV Knot Sense. It's made by Loon Outdoors. It's a UV set glue. And then I just put a little bit of a dab, and this is again why I do it at home. Put a little bit of dab on there. I take a toothpick and smooth it out a bit so that there's no bump there. And take my UV light and hit it with some UV. And when you do that, you end up with a smoother bump on the line, so it doesn't hang up in the guides when you take it off. So that's that knot. Now I'll show you an easier way to do that.
I think one day we could ask Dave to bring all his tools out and show us a collection of tools.
Well, this tool is pretty straightforward. They sell a fancier one that has a little point in here you can use to clean out the eye of your hook and stuff. But I just leave this at home. I don't take that in my vest. And the UV knot sense is, I usually carry this in my vest, and I don't need to take the UV thing, because you just hold your knot out in the sun for a bit and it'll set that stuff. It keeps the knot from slipping as well, which is what usually will ruin a knot, is that if it's not tied tightly enough, the knot will slip. Then the other end, you're going to want to attach your leader to the fly line. And this is going to be a little harder to see, but I usually, these days we get fly lines that already have a formed loop at the end of the line. Now, if you want to put loops on, I have shrink tubing and a heat gun. And you just put the right size of shrink tubing over, fold the line over, and then heat the daylights out of it. And it puts your own formed loop. Any of you bought T14 or T8 or whatever from Robinson's, you'll see Matt do that for you. But if you lose the loop for some reason, when you're out in the field, you don't have a heat shrink or tubing or heat gun handy. So how do you tie your leader back on? Another thing I find is that if you have a stiff mono for the first butt section of your leader, and it only needs to be like 6 inches or 8 inches, and then you put your loop in the mono, that tends to turn the leader over a little better. So what I do with this is I tie what's called a uni knot. I originally learned it as the Duncan loop, but it's called the uni knot. So with the uni knot, and let's see if I can hold it so you can see it. You make a loop like that. Can you see that? And then you bring it back over top. So you've got the loop going down the fly line from the tip down, and then another loop headed down. And you take the tag end and you put it through the loop at least 3 times. So you can see it's wound around that fly line. And then, and I would suggest, depending on the thickness of the mono, I would even suggest you do 4. It's going to be easy to see when I do this with the other stuff here in a minute. So I've got a good 3 wraps through that loop, 4 there. And then we just slowly tighten it down. And you'll see it will, you need to kind of collapse the knot as you tighten it. And I'm just pulling on the mono to do this. And when I get all of the bits close together, you have to work this a bit. Because this Maxima is really stiff, you have to work it a little more than if you're using a more supple nylon. And when you get there, you need one other little tool. It's called forceps. And you cinch it down. Get in there. You just got to make sure you get all these little loops together. And when you got that cinched, it ain't going nowhere. So there's your uni knot. And you again trim the ends. Now this one's not so critical to get it nice and smooth because this is the tip of the fly line is actually going out of the rod tip probably before you're not going to reel the whole fly line into your rod. So there's the uni knot, and that's as good a knot as the nail knot. So then what I do is to get loop to loop, I'll take the other end of this thing and I will about 8-10 inches of mono. And I'll tie this in the other material as well so you can see it. I tie a perfection loop. And what you do is you take the mono like so, and you make a loop with the tag end underneath, bring it around, make another loop over top and underneath again. So what you end up with is a figure 8. Let's see if I can do this so you can see it. A figure 8. And then I take the tag end and put it over top and down between the 2 loops where the 8s cross. And then I take the back loop and put it through the front loop and then cinch it down. And that makes a non-slip loop called a perfection loop. And I'll repeat that with another material. And as I say, if you need to do this, this gives you the loop-to-loop connection on the butt end of your leader. And if this Maxima is 15 pound, and it is stiff. So if you use a stiff material, it tends to transfer the energy over from the fly line to the leader a little better. I learned that before they made these factory manufactured loops on your fly line. All right, so from there, the next knot you need is how do you tie your leaders together? So here I've got 2 leaders, and I'm using 2 different pieces of fly line backing so that you can see them not being formed. And I'm also showing you that one of the things with the knots that I'm going to show you is you need to be able to tie different diameters of leader material together with a knot that is really solid. So the first knot is going to be the one that we've learned before, which is what we call the surgeon's knot, or the double surgeon's knot. So we line up the tip of the, let's do this way, tip of the one leader and the tip of the other facing each other, side by side. And then we make an overhand loop so that the one is behind the other. Now you have a double loop. You've got the tag end and the leader sticking out this side. And then I pass the end of the standing line, standing line through the loop once, and then you pull the leader through a second time. You put it through the loop a second time. Hope you can see this. This is a little harder to work with than when it's floppy. I'm using the backing. So now you'll see we've just basically made a double pass through that loop. And then we cinch it down. Now with any knot, I won't do it with these guys, but with any monofilament knot, the best thing to do to make sure the knot seats properly is to spit on it. And then you pull all the pieces together. That is the double surgeon's knot. And that's pretty strong. That's about 85% to 90% knot strength. But there's a virtually identical kind of knot called the Orvis knot. And it looks like exactly the same when you tie it, but it's a little bit different. Once again, you make this double two-line loop, but instead of passing it simply the two ends through the loop twice, you bring it up like this. You can see, so that this loop is sliding up and down there. And then you pass it around and through the loop twice. So it's basically the same knot, except for that first move where you make it so that there's a loop around the pair of lines. And when you've done that, see how it's not just wrapped around itself, it's got that little sliding loop on the left-hand side here. And then when you pull this sucker together and do the loop, tight ends up, it looks almost identical when you're done to the double surgeons, except it's a little longer. And it is 100% strength knot. It will, so that the weakest material in it will be the break strength of that knot. So I've been using that now for most of my leader connections, or tippet to leader connections. Now, the other one I'm not going to tie for you, but I'm going to show you basically how it works. And the other, because this material is hard to work with and you won't be able to see it in mono. The other is the blood knot. And the way you'd normally do a blood knot is you'd, again, line the two bits up together, one from another, hold it in one hand, your left hand, and go over wrap the tag end of the left hand knot over the top 3 times. And then you put the tag end between the 2 lines on the left-hand side of where your knot is. And I go from the top to the bottom. And then you take the other one and you go the opposite, the same direction, over top 1, 2, 3. And this is where it gets tricky with this soft material, is then you take and you put the tag end through that loop where the first one went in the opposite direction. And I just lost it. Anyway, you can look up that on the net. There's a guy that does a blood knot where he uses a toothpick to make it easier to shove the ends through that little hole. And what he does is he takes the two lines and crosses them over like that. He sticks the toothpick in here like that where they're across, holds it in the right hand where they're crossed, sticks the toothpick in, and then holds onto it with his fingers on one side, holds on with the fingers on the other side, and then takes his fingers and does this, twists the toothpick around 3 or 4 times, like that. And then you take the tag end, and because you got this little gap where the toothpick is, you stick the line up through the hole from that side, and then the line from the other side. And I can't do that with this material. He makes it look easy. It's not. But have a look at it. It's an interesting way of doing a blood knot. I don't use blood knots because I can make just as strong a knot with that Orvis knot. Now the next thing is, how do you attach your, once you've got your tippet material onto the leader, how do you attach your stuff to the fly or your hook? And there's several different knots that you can use for that. And I'll do this with the bright yellow backing so you can see it better. Now, the first knot, which most of you guys probably use, is the clinch knot. And that's where you put your fly line through the eye of the hook. Hold it there, and you go around the standing line, minimum of 3. And if it's 4x and 5x, you want to go 4 or so. And then you come and you bring it from the back side through the loop, just the tip, like that. Now this is the standard clinch. And when you cinch that down, it tightens right up against the hook. Now I found with some sizes of material, some weights of material, and some sizes of tippet, that the clinch knot does not hold. Now this one does, but I've tied clinch knots with this 30-pound backing that slip right out.
Yep.
So with mono, it's a slipperier knot, and I've had in 20-pound mono, I've had those things slip right through.
Dave, sorry to butt in.
Yeah.
The improved clinch knot works a heck of a lot better.
And that's what I'm going to show you.
Oh, okay.
That's what I do now. I use the improved clinch.
Right, okay.
So I go through there, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then again, through from the back side. Come on. Through from the back, through the loop from the backside, right up against the eye.
Excuse me,
And then
Dave.
you take the tag end.
We can't see what you're doing. Could you
Sorry.
hold it? That's
Yeah.
better. Thanks.
And you take the tag end and you put it back through this loop that you've just created, like that. Back through the loop you just created when you brought that forward, and then snug it down. And I have never had one of those let go. So again, through the eye, 3 or 4 times around, then back through the little hole between the eye and the the twists, and then back through the loop you just created. That's the improved clinch, and I have had no problem with that knot. Other than if the wind's blowing and your material is small, I have had problems with tying clinch knots because my fingers are not very dexterous. I can be a fumble finger guy. So I use what is called the uni knot or the Duncan loop. So through the eye of the hook, through the eye of the hook. And then what I do is I make a loop, goes backwards this way, kinks. So now I've got a loop where I brought the tip back around to where the eye of the hook is, and I pinch those together. And then I will pass the tip through here, again, minimum of 3. And if it's 4x or 5x, I'll do a 4 or maybe 5 through the loop. And I've got that nice round loop. Now, when I tighten this down, you see it makes a nice little knot right there. I get my fingers in this loop and snug it down. But this is a slip loop. So when I tighten the knot up, it's going to slide right down to the eye of the hook. And you can actually, with mono, you can actually pull it apart again. So one of the nice things is you can have a nice little loop that swivels around on the eye of the hook, gives a little more movement to the eye until it cinches down when you hook the fish. And that kind of slipping, it doesn't break, it doesn't damage the mono. Whoops, what happened there? Back to meeting. Back to meeting. Okay, I did something there. I must have hit the keyboard. So that's a slip knot. And it works really well. I got to the point where I will only use that. I don't even bother with the clinch knot for much of my tying, unless it's a bigger material, which is a little harder to manage. So what I found is, again, if the wind is blowing and my fingers are cold, I find there's an easier way to tie it. Topologically, it's the same. So I put that through, get a little bit of generous stuff, and then I let the hook hang, the fly hang right down there. And I make this loop underneath and bring the tag end up and put it between my fingers where I've got them pinched there. So I have the fly hanging down there and this loop, and it comes up and I pinch where it crosses. And then I pass the fly through that loop 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And then I grab the whole thing, hang on to the tag, and cinch the loop down. Now this is the same knot. It topologically, it's the same knot. But it's a lot easier to tie because I'm managing the fly instead of it flapping around in the breeze. I'm managing it to get it through that extra loop. And then you can leave the knot like that, or you can cinch it right down. So that's the uni knot, 2 different ways of tying it. And I found that I could almost tie that second one blindfolded. I can do it when it's starting to be hard to see in the late evening. And I can feel it more than I have to see it to tie it. And the last one I'm going to show you is the non-slip loop. So for the non-slip loop, before you deal with the fly, you tie a simple overhand knot in the line. and you put the leader through the eye of the hook. And now the key part. You take the end of your leader and you put it back through that overhand knot the same way it came out. So it came out this direction, you put it back through that direction. Then you wrap the tag end around the standing line 3 times. And then you put it back through that open loop the same way it came out. And cinch it down. And you have a non-slip loop. That won't slide. And if you want your fly to be able to dangle a lot, that's the one you want to use. Has everybody learned how to do a non-slip? Again, the trick is tie that overhand knot. Make sure that the line goes through your eye, then back in through the overhand loop the way it came out, wrap it around the standing line, and then from the back side back through the way it came out. That's pretty straightforward. Accessories.
Steve, before you go, so I heard somebody asking how you tied the rappella knot. That's very similar to the rappella knot.
Yeah, I
And
don't use it. I just use the non-slip if I'm going to do it that way.
No, but somebody was asking about the
Yep.
rappella knot, and that is the rappella knot, as well as the KNUFF knot. They're
Yep.
very, very similar.
Now, accessories, like I said, the one thing you want if you're having trouble with your knot slipping is this knot sense. You just carry that in your vest. You put a little dab on your knot when it's tied and expose it to the sun, and it will not slip. Or you can take one of these UV lights. Another thing is these things, tippet rings. Now, it's probably more important for those of us that can that use Phil Rowley's strike indicators. One of the problems with Phil's strike indicators is that the little pin that you use to set the line into the strike indicator, if your fly is broken off and you set the hook and that pin comes loose, it goes down, it comes right off the fly line, right off the tippet, and then you lose your indicator in the pin. So putting one of these little tippet loops in before you tie the fly onto the tippet. So you tie the tippet loop on the end of your leader, then you put your tippet on the loop and then down to the fly. So that if the fly breaks off or your tippet breaks, that strike indicator pin stops where the tippet loop is. If you're fishing with 2 flies, or you want to hang a little sinker off of it, that's the tippet ring is where you tie it. You tie one tippet off the tippet ring, and you tie a dropper off to put your little lead weight on. Same thing, you can do the same thing with a swivel. And for me, if I'm fishing chironomids, I put a swivel in. And again, if in Alberta you can fly 2 flies, you tie 1 fly off the top end of the swivel and one off the bottom. And these little swivels, they're pretty cheap. You can get them black so that they don't shine. So that's about
just a matter of interest. My wife bought me this interesting little gadget. I don't know if you can see it. It's called a Towton line welder system.
Oh yeah?
All you do is you just lay 2 lines across the top of it, close the top of the lid, and push a button, and it welds the 2 lines together with the resin. And it is unbreakable.
Huh.
So it's for the lazy man or people with arthritis in their hands.
Well, yeah, you find ways of doing this stuff when you find yourself out and the sun's going down and your fingers are cold and the fish are rising and you're in a hurry. You find ways that you can tie knots. That's how I learned how to tie that other method for doing the Duncan loop, and because I can tie that almost blindfolded with small material. that's about it.
Ron, if you're listening, Ron SD, you might want to go off the side of your camera if you're listening.
Beg pardon?
Thanks, Dave.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Dave.
That one's good.
Dave.
Yeah.
I tie my own leaders, and I use the blood knot. And when you mentioned the toothpick, I immediately went down and got a toothpick, and that is a far superior method. It took me less than a minute to tie the knot, whereas the other one, it was taking me, quite a long period of time. Thank you. That was a good tip.
If you look it up on the web, the guy that does this, he ties and he sells commercially hand-tied leaders, but he can tie a blood knot in like 40 seconds.
Yes.
It's just boom, boom, boom. I've tried it. I'm not that good. Maybe I just have to spend more practice time at it.
After the first 1,000, you'll get really good.
Yeah.
I have one more comment to make, Dave, and like how to attach your line to your backing.
Yeah.
And if you can be like sometimes you've got more lines and you've got reels.
Yeah.
So what I do is I tie a loop on the end of my line that's big enough for this to go through, and I use a loop-to-loop connection. So I can use the same reel, and I can just use the loop-to-loop connection, and this slips right through the knot, and I'm fishing again pretty quick.
Yeah, I've done that for all my saltwater lines because on a saltwater line you tie bimini twists.
Yes.
And you tie a big loop in the back so that you can pass it through the fly line loop and then pass the whole reel through the loop that's on your backing.
Exactly.
And that it makes it fairly easy to make a line change. You just have to make sure that the backing loop, if you're tying like a perfection loop, that it's a big loop enough to go over and around the fly reel. But yeah, that's something you would want to consider rather than the nail knot.
Yes.
I didn't bother with the arbor knot because that I can use the uni knot instead of the arbor knot, and if you're buying a new reel and putting backing on, well, you can get the guy at Robinson's to do that for you.
I've discovered how to do a perfection loop to tie flies on with, and it works really well because you put the fly on first.
Yeah.
And do your loop, create the overhand loop. And then I've learned to do it slightly different than you do. You go around your loop and then come back through the middle, but the fly is on this little loop and you just drop it in through and it makes it really easy. Again, what do you do with a fly dangling in midair? So this has that same technique, and you get the perfection loop knot that way and non-slip.
Dave, just to confirm something, the uni knot would be good for if you wanted to extend your fly line by 100 or 200 feet, or any line rather, by a couple of feet.
Yeah.
100 feet.
Yep.
The uni knot would do well.
Yes, it's and it's a fairly easy knot to tie is the nice thing. It's just through the fly and you bring it back, make that reverse loop 3 times through and snug it down. And the sliding, I've seen that guy do that with a leader knot, a leader to tippet knot, is tie 2 uni knots, one on one leader and one on the other, and then cinch them down and slide them together. They jam up against each other. But I find the Orvis knot just as easy to tie, and it's just as strong.
You can always use the nail knot too on both sides. That's a very, very strong knot.
Yeah. Good.
Thank you, Dave. That was really awesome.
Thank you. Yeah.
Good. Hope we all. And again, if anybody has some questions about them later on, we can always redo a knot for you.
Maybe when we get together, we can have a tying session. It's much. I noticed the difference between fly tying on Zoom and fly tying on person is when you actually get a chance to tie the fly in person, right?
Yeah.
And then you can make correction.
Yeah.
Anyways,
all right.
other than not, Tony, Bill's away. Anything going on at the hatchery?
Yeah, actually, you know, I mean, all the fish are out of the main building. Still having a little bit of an issue with one of the tanks with a bacterial infection, so we're getting quite a lot of morts. That's one of the ones that that young gal from UVic is running the experiments on the otoliths. But hopefully we'll get that under control soon. The main project, that's what I spent yesterday doing, was repairing the dam wall and laying a slab under the spillway and sealing it. And we're going to be putting the rubber liner in the pond, hopefully this Thursday or next week Thursday. Other than that, nothing. You know, it's kind of a quiet time, other than feeding the fish and doing the morts and cleaning. Peter and Bill are today actually heading up to Nanette because we've got those other tanks that they're going to inspect. So hopefully we'll get a full report from Bill next week. But other than that, nothing really special.
What's the size of the salmon now?
Oh, maybe about 2.5 to 3 inches. So for the coho anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're a ways away. Still trying to figure out how we're going to do the clipping. You know,
that clipping machine that they talked about last year, is it going to come around or?
No, I don't think so. But you know, we can just extend the clipping bench. Probably that's the thoughts that we're going to do, so we can keep people 6 feet apart because we've got quite a few fish to clip.
Yeah, that might be the only way you can do it.
Yeah. So, but other than that, nothing really special to report. Main project being the tanks that Bill and Peter are looking at. Interestingly enough, I don't know if anyone knew, we found a cougar cub, a dead one, just up by the shed, very emaciated. So, which was kind of interesting. So there's a cougar in the area, we think.
Last week there were sightings all throughout Saanich.
Yeah.
Colin.
They had one in Oak Bay as well.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay.
We got plenty of food for them.
We had a bit of a bear issue as well because we were throwing traps in the local creek there because we had some salmon escape. And then obviously the bait that we're putting in, the eggs into the fish traps, attracted the bears, so we had to stop doing that.
Yeah.
Just to follow up, don't forget if somebody's out for a drive to have a look at the fishway that's going in. Bill mentioned last week.
If anybody's interested in going up to Campbell River and camping or staying in a hotel for a few nights, a couple of nights anyway, let me know. I'd be glad to help organize something. There's a nice campsite right there.
I'm interested.
Yeah, I'd like to go too. I'm kind of restricted to close to the island here.
Yeah, well, we all are.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if anybody's interested in going to Campbell River, send an email to Colin and we'll get something organized. Since you're speaking, Colin, anything new in the library?
No, you're the only one who's borrowed any books. Oh, no, and Christopher. But the ones John wanted to borrow, you've got.
So the fly tying will be on same times, 10 o'clock on Saturday, Dave?
Saturday, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
We
normally sign on around 9:30 or so and have a little conversation.
I'll make a decision on what I'm going to tie. It might be just a simple, straightforward pattern of some kind.
Yeah, it would be good. That fly that Jim McDonald mentioned for the pinks.
Oh, the pink.
Yeah,
mentioned
Campbell
the
River Special.
Yeah,
I'll have to look it up.
we'll get you doing what we did to Florin, made him took up those hoppers and learned how to tie them up. Anything new in the Gilly Club, Dennis?
Nothing new except I've got an announcement here that if you're thinking about joining us up at Buttle Lake on September 9th, this week on the 9th is the time you can start booking in 2 months in advance. Peter and I are going up there, and maybe my buddy's going to join me for a couple of days. The other thing is that Kluksui, I've got 5 club members are going to be going up to Kluksui this year, different times, but we'll seeing one another there up there.
When is the best time to go up?
For Kluksui?
Yeah.
Well, in my disclaimers, I say that one of the things you don't know if the fish are going to be there or how many you can keep. And be honest with you, the last 3 years have not been good at all. But
they go in cycles, so you're about to hit a cycle soon.
Well, last year was so bad that the Keel River wasn't even producing. So I'm going up there for 3 weeks again, and I'll bring my crabbing traps. But last year crabbing was poor because they introduced river otters into the system.
Oh.
And they just took out all the crabs that were within walking distance. So if you're going to go crabbing, you'll need a boat up there to go out deeper. So yeah,
and they do a number. The otters do a number on a whole bunch of things. I watched the show on sea urchins and not sea urchin. Yeah, the urchin. The natives used to harvest them, and the otters cleaned them right out.
Yeah, that's the good thing about otters. Because the sea urchins aren't good.
Yeah, there's a difference between the sea otters and the river otters.
Yeah.
The sea otters are the ones that go down after the urchins.
Yeah.
And the urchins are one of the reasons why there's been a decline in kelp. And that affects herring, because if the kelp's not there, there's no place for the herring to lay their eggs.
Yeah.
So the introduction of sea otters in the mid-coast has made a difference to kelp in Bella Coola area, apparently. But
that's where this film I
haven't got
watched
to
was
the
on.
north yet.
Well, the sea otters are slowly working their way south. Apparently, they are supposedly out by Banfield now, but we'll see.
Well, that's good news, because that will make a difference to kelp, and then more kelp, you get more herring. More herring, everybody's happy.
Yeah. Just in passing, Kluksui is a beautiful campsite. I stayed there a couple of times a few years ago. It was a beautiful campsite. There's even a restaurant if you don't feel like cooking. So
the nice thing too is that Port McNeil is only 10 minutes away. But at Kluksui, you've got camping for everything from a bare spot for a tent to cabins. So there's something there for everybody.
There's water, electricity, there hookups too, eh?
Yes.
Just a further comment on the sea otters. Apparently up at Cayucot, which is where they were reintroduced from Alaska a number of years ago, the kelp forests have really come back.
Yeah.
And everything's really great up there that way.
Yeah.
This week, Dave was kind enough to do knots for a speaker program. So if anybody wants to volunteer at any time we've had everything from slideshows to whatever, volunteer to take up about 15 minutes of a meeting. It's really interesting for people to show their interest. Mike's done on his brown back chickadee, if I remember.
Chestnut back.
Chestnut back.
Chestnut back. It was brown though. Anyways, if anybody wants to do that, we're more than welcome to hear your quirks about different things. And as Mick talked about the conservation, there's a lot going on that he's involved in. So please read his emails that come out. Somebody have a question? Anyways, I think basically for the regular meeting, we're just about finished unless somebody has something to add.
Oh, good.
Any questions or observations or input about the meeting, about how we do things?
Oh, I think it's running quite nicely.
Anyways, it's kind of funny how you get on a, Dave mentioned about his tools, and I keep ripping him about his tools. But I started tying some different chronomets, and they're falling all over the place. Anyways, bottom line is, I never had any trouble with beads placement until he mentioned you should get this pair of tweezers for beads. I probably have a dozen or more beads laying around the floor now, because ever since he's mentioned that, I have dropped them. I've never seen that dropped before. Maybe my arthritis is setting in. Anyways, it's kind of interesting. I'll have to look at his tool again when he shows it next time.
Well,
Tony,
woman
Tony, what was the name of that welding tool you had?
Tauten, Tauten. Oops.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we're not getting any younger, that's for sure.
The woman beside Robinson's probably has tweezer, the woman that
I would
makes
think, yeah.
jewelry probably has one of those tweezers.
I bought these pair of pliers from Michael's, and
Yeah.
it's great for debarbing your hooks, but it's also great for a whole bunch of other things, right? But that's what they're for, is they're craft pliers.
Well, drill a hole in the end for the beads.
Yeah. I could probably take if I had a drill press, drill.
Yeah, it's probably hardened steel though, so
Yeah.
It is too. Yeah, you wouldn't get through those easy.
No. It's
Just before we
amazing.
go, guys, I want to show you a picture of my son's pike.
Ooh,
Oh,
52 inches on the fly.
wow.
Wow.
It's a pretty nice fish.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Good.
Good. Any other input or questions?
No.
No?
I guess for the majority of the people, we'll see you next week. Other than that, Dave has graciously agreed to do some more fly tying demonstrations. I'm sure Florin will be there too. Why don't you task him for one of the flies? So
I'll email him and see if he's had anything in mind.
he has a good sense of humor anyway.
Oh yeah, yeah. Florin's a
Yeah.
good guy.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
right.
Anything else?
Okay.
No, that's it.
See you later, guys.
We'll see you next week.
All right.
Great.
Okay, we'll see
Have a good
you.
week, guys.
Bye. Thanks again.